Let's continue our discussion with this introduction to big data module, and we will cover today the characteristics of big data. So the objectives of today's session are that we'll try to characterize the big data, and then we'll study the 3 V's, that is volume, velocity, and variety. So now the question is, what qualifies to be a big data? Is it structure of data, the pricing data, which is a structured data, video, which is unstructured data, or XML, which is the semi-structured data? Or you think it is the amount of data, whether it is terabytes, petabytes, or exabytes, or it is the processing technique. I mean, whether we have to strip the data and then process it in parallel, or any other technique. So what do you think qualifies to be big data? So I mean, there's no definite answer to what the data qualifies to be called a big data. But again, there's a common way to characterize and describe big data using 3 V's, which is volume, velocity, and variety. Let's try to study each one of them one by one. So volume, the first characteristic. So the volume is the key characteristic for big data because the data is getting generated on a very large scale. Now the scale at which the data is generated is because we are getting the data is being available to us from the variety of devices and sources. Now imagine every mouse click, phone call, text message, web search, and project transaction and whatnot, everything is stored. So if everything is getting stored, that simply means the big data is getting generated at a huge scale. So the volume of the data is pretty huge. So with that, we have a fundamental question to answer here. So how much data do you think is generated every day? Try to consider the data getting generated throughout the whole world. So what do you think? Take a pause and think about it. Okay, let me try to simplify this. Instead of a day, how much data do you think is generated every minute? Let's try to answer this question. In order to answer this question, let's look at this infographic, which is shared by Domo. It shows in 1 minute of a day how much data is generated. Now, if you see 500 hours of YouTube videos uploaded every minute, around 104,000 hours is spent on Zoom meetings every day. Around $443,000 is spent on Amazon by shoppers. Around 231 million messages, email messages are sent across. 1.7 million pieces of content is shared on Facebook. 66,000 photos are shared on Instagram. So just imagine in a single minute how much data is getting generated. So coming back to the question again, so the answer to this question is these many bytes. So let's try to see how many bytes are there. So this last 3 bits, this becomes your kilobytes. Next 3 becomes your megabyte, gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, and exabytes. Around 2.5 exabytes of data every minute. Let's look at this graph, which shows how much data is getting generated every year in zettabytes. So this is the yearly data. If you see starting 2016, 2017, the data is being generated at a very alarming stage. It's increasing day by day. That means we are adding so many sources of data here that the volume is getting increased day by day. So the 90% of the data in the world has been created in the last 2 years alone. So look at this red peaks, you see 2021, 22, and 23 is still going on. It's a kind of a forecast here. But you see, if you combine the last 2 or 3 years, if you sum of all the data which has been generated before, if you see the 90% of the data is generated in the last 2 years alone. So let's look at the next characteristic, which is variety. So variety here means we get the data in different formats because the data is different for an email, for an audio, video, sensor data, and etc. So we get data, big data in different formats. Now we also understand because of these formats, we can classify this big data in structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. And also, how is this data getting generated from? It gets generated from a purchase transaction, website traffic, health data, Facebook, Twitter, blogs, Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. So many variety of sources are there, and the data from those variety of sources is available in disparate formats, many different formats. So if you see, what are the common sources of big data? So one of the sources machines. So what kind of data we get from machines? The sensor data, the Internet of Things, robotic process automation, we commonly called as RPA, satellite images, industrial equipments, and genomics. Next we have the social engineering. The social engineering, we have social media posts, videos, images, emails, and then we have the transactional data, which is sale records, purchase records, customer feedback, inventory management. So you see there's a lot of variety in this data. The next characteristic is velocity. The velocity is, the speed at which the data is getting generated. So we saw that infographic where the data, how much data is getting generated in a single minute. And you see that 4.5 billion likes on Facebook happen every day. 500 million tweets are sent every day. 500 hours of video is uploaded on YouTube every minute, right? We saw what is the velocity of data, how much the data is getting generated every minute. So in 7 years, 15 times the amount of data that exists today will be created every single year. Just imagine, in the next 7 years, 15 times the amount of data that exists today, 15 times the amount of data will be created every single year. If you see these yellow bars, this is the forecast. So 2023, 24, and 25. If you see the forecast, you see what is the velocity of data. The only reason for this is that we are adding new devices day by day. With the Internet of Technologies, like every device will be a computing device. We call it a ubiquitous or everywhere computing. So every data will be generating, every sensor will be generating so much of data, right? So that is why it is said that, in the next 7 years to come, and 15 times the volume of data we have right now will be generated every single year. Okay, with this, we have studied all the 3 V's. Do you think there is any other V which is remaining? Or is there any additional V or a characteristic? Yes. So we have variability. Again, an important characteristic of big data. The variability means that the meaning of data constantly changes. So what this means, it's a very important thing to understand here. When we talk about big data, let's say you are measuring temperature, you have 2 sensors, which is measuring temperature of 2 different cities. But one of the sensor is representing the data on a Celsius scale. Another one is representing the data on the Fahrenheit scale. So when you try to collate that data, when you try to bring that data into your system, let's say we are interested in a particular continent or a city, then both of them have got a different meaning. The numbers will not match. 100 degree Fahrenheit is not equal to 100 degree of Celsius, right? So that's why this variability gets introduced, because every sensor is different. The reading which the sensors take, that is different. Before big data can be analyzed, the context and the meaning of data sets must be understood, right? The 100 degrees on a Celsius scale, 100 degrees on a Fahrenheit scale, they both are different. So we should understand the context. And then now, just because they both are different, they poses a challenge. So what is the challenge here? We have to have a method where we can convert that into a common base, right? Either we have to convert Fahrenheit into Celsius or Celsius into Fahrenheit. So that's how, if we do that, that is the way to manage your big data. The next V is value. Again, a very important V here, value. The value refers to the usefulness and relevance of data. Now we have data everywhere. Humongous amount of data is there. But if the data is not useful, it is not relevant. So what is the fun of having that data, right? So data must be valuable and reliable just because we are trying to extract some meaningful information out of data. And why? Because all our business decisions and opportunities, everything relies on what decisions we take based on those insights. So with this, we have covered some of the key characteristics of big data. Let's see what we have done today. So we have characterized the big data in terms of multiple V's. So we saw volume, velocity, variety, and then we introduced variability, again an important concept, and then the value. So thank you so much. Stay tuned for the next session where we are going to study about the applications of big data.